name's Raphael. I finished uni about 10 years ago in Loughborough.
Whoop. Whoop, whoop.
Yeah, supposedly. And since then I've took on a journey to try and become self-employed and self-sufficient and potentially try and provide a great environment for myself and one for my family as well. So I commenced with certain businesses. Three things about me are: one, I'm from Lewisham. Sometimes a good thing, sometimes a bad thing. One, I'm a great believer in talent is irrelevant when you're trying to sort of become an entrepreneur or self-employment. I believe it's all about hard work. And the second one is I try and improve 1% every day. It was a challenge that I took on for myself once I finished university, and since then I've sort of just taken on the challenge every day just to improve 1% in so many different areas. It's not a lot to ask of yourselves, but it does only take 100 days to get 100 times better than you was, so I found it a good challenge.
That's great. Thank you very much. 1% every day. Like, can you elaborate on that? I know you wake up at 5 a.m. every day.
Yeah, so the idea behind it is just to sort of challenge yourself. So at the end of every day, just ask yourself, are you around the people that you want to be? Are you in the right environment? Are you one step closer to where you want to be? Are you trying to be someone that your sort of goals were set out by other people, or are you trying to challenge yourself by your own goals? So by 1%, I just sort of change the people I hang around with. I change the way I speak. I change the places I go to in the evenings. I change how I get up in the mornings and what I do. And I feel if you can try and do that just 1% challenge, it really does change your environment.
Cool. So obviously you mentioned you went to the fantabulous Loughborough University, and over the past 8 to 9 years you've managed to build 3 successful businesses, 2 of which I've kind of seen start from empty buildings, and you've managed to grow them into successful businesses. You didn't study anything business related, you studied architectural engineering. How did you know when you wanted to be an entrepreneur?
I don't think it happens overnight, and I think the word is slightly overused, but entrepreneurism is something that I challenged myself on. I finished university. It was a bad time in the community to try and sort of find a job, so I got rejected from about 15 jobs. So my challenge to become entrepreneurial was slightly different. It was forced, and actually there wasn't much of a choice. My parents were self-employed. I was the first one to get to university. After university, I was promised this sort of fantastic job, and soon realised that after 15 rejections, I wasn't as amazing as I first thought. So I sort of was forced into a world where I wanted to look at my strengths. And something that I realised very quickly, that there was only one thing between everything I wanted and myself, and that was just doing it. Just waking up every morning and just doing it. There's a big difference between how you feel when you think about doing something and how you feel once you've done it. And the morning after you've done something, it feels completely different. So once I started getting on this sort of bandwagon of challenging myself, and actually the achievement, the motivation just comes naturally, but you really do have to do it. It's not a short-term thing. 100 million %, it's not the easy route. So you have to take the hard route, because everyone is taking that easy route.
Okay. And so how did you have the confidence to start that journey that most people would deem risky? I mean, you grew up in Lewisham, South London. You went to uni in a small town called Loughborough. If you've been to Loughborough before, you'll know it's nothing without the students. Like, literally over summer, it's a ghost town. And it's pretty questionable. You know, how did you know there was a market out there for what you were doing?
Yeah. So when you first sort of start a business, it's not how you sort of challenge yourself in your environment. It's really dependent on your confidence within what you're trying to do. And sometimes it's not as easy as sort of saying, what do I want to do? It's more of a sort of restriction of what you have to do. And I found that I was a lot better when I had to do things rather than when I wanted to do things. Because if I had the choice, I would always choose to play PlayStation or sort of go to football with my friends or do a social event. So what I found is I kept putting myself in these positions, which was I had to do it. So
Not
I kept
purposely.
saying,
You would purposely put yourself
Purposely
in
put myself in these positions where you really did want to just have to do it. So I would say to people, I'm going to put this event on. And if there was 0 people at the event, I guarantee you the next time you say you're going to put an event on, you will 100% put your heart into making sure that more than 0 people turn up, because it's very embarrassing. So I found that embarrassment really created my environment.
Okay, cool. And so you chose to start off with property, which I know a lot of the audience is interested in getting into. We all want to hopefully own a home and all that kind of jazz. How did you get into that sector? How did you actually get into that sector? How did you make the transition from architectural engineering to property in a town that you didn't even grow up in? Yeah.
So I started, once I finished university, I sort of relied on university to get me a job, which was probably my biggest ever mistake, because unfortunately it failed me. So I decided to try something else. So I set some goals that I wanted to be involved in property. So I set a blueprint in my life, and I said, the ideal situation is that I'm hanging around with landlords, I'm working with landlords, I go to events that landlords go to, I go to the same gym that landlords go to, I go and eat in the same restaurants that landlords go to. Surely being around landlords would turn me into a landlord. And I said to myself every day, the more I talk about landlords, surely there is a chance, subliminally, that I will become a landlord. So that's what I did. I kept saying to myself, let me go and flyer for landlords rather than nightclubs. Let me help landlords out. And I finally found one particular gentleman in Loughborough who was quite fortunate. He had a lot of property at a young age, but he couldn't be bothered to do a lot. So I ended up doing everything for him. And for a couple of years, it was a bit like having a boss. Which I wasn't very good at. One of my weaknesses is listening. So I decided to help him, and I committed to that environment, to helping advertise properties. And then slowly, what happened was I started an agency, and then, my first landlord walked through the door, and I read my first tenancy agreement on Google. And, slowly it started to happen. The truth is buying properties isn't what a property developer does. You have to start from the beginning, something that's actually achievable. Renting property is the same. If you're involved in property, it will happen that you'll buy property one day. But I guarantee you, I didn't start my property development career through buying a property on the first day. I'd rented nearly 1,000 properties before I even bought a property, before I even started looking around properties. So just make sure everything you do is achievable. Make sure you learn from it instantaneously. And make sure that you always have the end goal, that you do want to buy property, but the end goal is to buy a property. The first goal is not to buy a property. Thousands of pounds don't just get saved up for nothing.
Cool. And I've had the pleasure of shadowing Raf for a few days, and we did go around to see a few properties, and I got a taste of what it's like to be a landlord. And you do have quite a few stories. Do you want to share an interesting one?
Yeah. So when I there are a few that I probably won't share. There's a few that I will. So when I first started, I was obviously an ex-student, so I was very pro-student. So everything I did was like, the students, they're in the right, and the landlords are in it for the money. And I kept saying to myself, make sure you look after the students, because you used to be one. And I went into it thinking all agents are a nightmare. And then I think it was my first managed property where 4 rugby students from Loughborough came into the office and said to me, "Hi Raf, we had a party last night." And I was thinking, okay, that's normal. I'm okay with that. I can sort of settle with that. And then they ended up telling me a story about how they lawnmowered their name into the living room carpet.
Oh my God.
And how sorry they were, and how they genuinely couldn't afford to replace the carpet, but they'd clean houses for me across the summer.
Oh wow. Did their deposit not cover it? Did the deposit not cover it?
Unfortunately, because Raphael's first property didn't take deposits, because I was trying to find a niche in the market, it wasn't the best choice I've ever made. But you find ways around it. And to be honest with you, it's probably my best experience. It definitely set me up for the rest of them. I don't think I'm ever going to get anything worse than sitting in front of four sort of, I think they were drunk as well in the morning, students looking at me going they'd lawnmowed Jonathan into the living room carpet.
Cool. And then you made a big leap, what, about 2 or 3 years ago? So you went from property development into food. So Raf now owns a pizzeria. It's a really cool and quirky one. It's called Peter's. And then you also now open a gym, which opened up last year. Yeah. So you've gone from property to food to fitness. What inspired you to make this transition? And how easy was the transition?
It's not easy. Restaurants are a nightmare. There's absolutely no shadow of a doubt. Relying on so many people is really difficult. With the properties, I was sort of very reliant on my sort of self. So when I got up in the mornings, if I worked really hard, I'd, make loads of money and rent lots of properties. But with the restaurant, it's completely different. You're so reliant on, 3 things: the service, the food, and the people. So it was tricky, but for me, I always knew what my strengths were, and I always knew what my weaknesses were. So I knew that the actual product was quite irrelevant in the whole thing, and I knew that I wanted to create a community. And I knew if I'd managed to create a community between tenants and landlords, that I could create a community between, say, pizza and the community of Loughborough. So that's how we dealt with sort of the change of industry. We found it was actually irrelevant, and that I wouldn't be making the pizzas and I wouldn't be serving the pizzas. All I would be doing is creating a community for people to eat pizza. So it's always looking at the product as the irrelevant part. It's actually the brand which people buy into. And that's something that you have to really take into account nowadays, that it's the journey in which you give people, the why behind everything you do. People aren't buying what we do anymore, they're buying why we do it. And so you have to offer lots and lots of value behind every single product that you potentially try and sell someone. So if you think of it like this, before you actually sell a product, the guidance that we're getting at the moment from marketing sort of experts is that you actually have to give people 3 types of value before you actually try and sell them anything. So you have to give, and then you take. So just bear that in mind, that it's not always about just upfront selling. You have to sort of create a community and then give them something to spend within that community, whether it's buying a pizza, going to the gym, or renting a property. We find that creating a community around those areas is what makes people spend money within those communities.
Cool. So just for your information, if you guys ever want to rent one of Raf's houses, you get a free gym membership. So cheeky plug. So you told me before that your journey as an entrepreneur has been quite lonely. I think a lot of people recently, the idea of entrepreneurialism appeals to them because it, offers freedom. But you've told me that your journey's been quite lonely. You spent a lot of nights up working alone. How do you stay motivated during those moments? Is it still lonely, actually, 8 or 9 years?
Yeah, it's very lonely. It's quite difficult because you end up, your first 3 years, you end up learning a lot. No one teaches you how to run small businesses within university or education or your parents. And you do find your own feet. So don't ever think that your first sort of 15, probably 45 mistakes that you make, it's over and you're not good at it. The realism of it is that I found people to fill in my weaknesses, and I definitely had them. I had lots of them. I knew that I was good with people, but I didn't really know that I didn't have attention to detail. So I knew that my motivation would be through growth. And I knew that if I could set my mind that there was always someone behind me willing to work 24 hours a day, and that he would catch me up the minute that I step back or the minute I take my eye off the ball. I sort of kept really focused. And I know it sounds quite scary to put yourself in that mentality, but I genuinely believe that there is always someone younger and better than me behind me, chasing me. Because I always remember as a kid, when you get chased in the dark, I was so much faster, definitely than I am now, but before as well. So I always try and put myself in the state of mind that I'm willing to go further than anyone else. And that's something that is really hard to teach yourself. By taking on a lot of responsibility, you do achieve that. And that's something that you have to do. The minute I employed someone, it took me 5 years to employ one person, and it's taken me 3 years to employ 85 people. And the day I employed someone, I really did realize that actually motivation comes with responsibility. When you have to do something, it's a completely different subject.
Cool. And so along this journey, what has been the biggest hurdle you faced? What almost broke you?
I've never really had anything that's broke me, because I'm very good at ignoring bad luck, which is something that my parents hate. I don't really learn very well from my lessons, but I think the two hurdles that I've really had across life is potentially the people around me using the word can't. I really do hate the word can't. I found that my parents were hairdressers in Lewisham, and they were quite motivated. They were self-employed, but they did always say to me, you know, there are limitations and there are restrictions, and it's weird, but you'll find your environment does really limit you. And I want you to really outthink that. When you think, I can't do that, or it's hard work, you know, I can't do this and I can't do that, it is really a cheap scapegoat. You know, I know it's really easy to do. I still do it today. When I say it, I think I hate people like you that say this, you know. So now I'm sort of finding my businesses are growing. And as they grow, I find there's a lot more barriers in place. You know, there's a lot more, I can't do this. Just like when you go to the bank, when they say they can't lend you the money, it's not that they can't. It's just what you're offering them. It's not being expressed correctly, or it's not being diagnosed correctly. So yeah, I think the word can't is probably, with my parents included in that, they were convinced that I should go to university and go and find a job. So they wanted me to learn from all their mistakes. But actually, just live exactly how you want to every day, and just make sure that everything you do is great. The one thing that I will say to you, every time I've done something half-hearted, I've failed miserably. You know, if you want to do something, make sure it's within your passion and make sure it's great. Everything you do is great. Every choice, every email, every letter, everything you do has to be great, because otherwise you won't stick out and you won't succeed. There are other people out there doing it normally, and it's a very competitive market. I mean, I'm in Loughborough, and you know, I know London's going to be even more difficult for me once the challenge comes along.
Cool, so that does lead me on to my next question. Do you see yourself ever moving back to London or into a bigger city like Manchester or Birmingham? Because people perceive those places to have a bit more opportunities. Yeah,
I think, you know, like we always said, the reason why I didn't come back to London was because I felt like there was a lot of hungry people down here, especially, you'll know what I mean by that comment. But Lewisham sort of allowed me to realise how far people were willing to go, sometimes in the wrong sort of context, sometimes in the right context, but people were willing to go so far. You know, that's where my real mentality came from, the fact that I didn't like where I lived, and I didn't like the people around me, and I didn't want to be one of them. And I soon realised that actually the smaller towns, there's a lot less money, but actually there's a lot less hunger there, and people are a lot more comfortable. And I found a community where I could potentially case study some of my brands. So I picked them as a case study. Do I think I'll come to London? I'm sure one day the opportunity will come, but it has to be natural and it has to be a gut feeling. And the day I have a bit of flavour again for London will be the day that I'll come back down. But at the moment, I don't see any plans. I kind of like the Midlands. I feel comfortable there. And I'm not getting hyped up by sort of the environment or being in the capital at the moment, especially with the prices down here.
Cool. So does anyone in the audience have any questions to ask Raffaele? Cool. Okay. Is that Lola? Yeah, Lola.
How important is, again, related to numbers, but more to do with...
Sorry, darling, can you please speak up?
This question is also related to numbers, but more to do with yourself personally. Like, how important would you say numbers are, or rather being good with numbers as a business owner? Because I think like a lot of people, maybe they have an idea that's like really creative, and like you said, they're willing to put their efforts and energy into building the idea, but I feel like numbers or the numerical aspect of owning a business puts them off.
Yeah, I believe I'm creative, and I'm a left-sided thinker, so I don't do numbers well at all. And I was always one of these people, probably because my parents brought me up like this, that as long as the bank account is positive rather than negative, I'm okay. And it doesn't really work like that, but it does work at the beginning. And what I will say is money is actually completely irrelevant. It's completely irrelevant. I've always focused on it, and slowly I've realized that actually it's not about the money. As long as you've got the traffic and you've got people spending, even if you're making a very small amount, at one point that community will build and it will be worth something. So at the moment, the finances are key to making something work, and I would never stand here in front of anyone and say that it's not key. But actually being good at numbers is irrelevant. I'm completely terrible at it. I just needed to put more and more effort into it. You know it's your weakness, so let someone else do it. If you concentrate on the weakness, by the time you get good enough, there will be someone out there that's already good at it. So just make sure that you concentrate on your strengths and you pay someone to do your weaknesses.
Thank you.
No worries.
Cool.
Hello.
So second row in the white top. Oh, no, the other side.
What kind of advice would you give to a current student really wanting to venture out into the property development sector in terms of experience and finding maybe people they can shadow? It's not really easy, so I'm currently doing it myself. I'm struggling to find like
No, I know. I definitely, I'm still in a little bit of 50-50, whether it's go with a big company and get lost, become the photocopy boy or girl, or, find someone who's probably owns 20 properties, is a little bit dodgy. It's really tough. I think a balance between the lot, and I think just make sure whatever you do, the minute you feel like you've learned what you need to learn, the minute you've picked up the knowledge, just go somewhere else. Yeah. That's really key. For 2 years, just go venturing around. I'd go and work for someone like Foxtons, and actually just learn the corporate world straight away, spend a year doing Foxtons, and then spend a year with a private property developer, and you'll really get a balance between the lot. And honestly, I know this sounds funny, but feel free to literally work for free. I know it sounds really weird, but actually when someone's not paying for you, they'll give you real knowledge and they'll really appreciate you. And I know it sounds a bit hard at the beginning. I sort of found it quite hard, but please try and make sure that you go with the best person that you can find and just offer your services for free and do everything that they want. The opportunities will arise for sure.
Thank you.
Cool. Okay, I'm just going to take one last question, then we have to close. So just this lady in the grey, yeah?
Hiya, I just wanted to ask, what would you say are the principles or the daily habits that you live your life by?
You might hate this. I'm definitely a 5 a.m.er, so I'm at the house at 5 a.m. every morning. It's something that I did it because it actually made sure that I was working. And there's no point getting up at 5 a.m. and going on YouTube, So I literally, in my whole diary, I have time to go for a walk. The mind doesn't concentrate longer than half an hour, so there is absolutely no point, in sort of spending ages, sort of thinking that you're working efficiently because you're not. I've been a busy fool, and it's not enjoyable and you don't get anywhere. So one, I would personally, wake up early. Late nights is not really that motivational, although people do find, convenience in working late at night. And make sure that you plan everything. On Sunday, I literally plan my perfect blueprint of my whole week, what I want to achieve from it, who I want to speak to, and who I want to have lunch with, and make sure that you pick people that you usually wouldn't pick. So don't go for lunch with the people that you know everything about, make sure you just pick someone random and invite them out for lunch. It's amazing the things that can happen once you literally come out of your comfort zone and just say, right, this week I'm going for lunch with 5 people that I usually wouldn't go for lunch for. So 5 a.m. lunches, blueprint your whole week. Including exercise, including spending time with your family. It's all important. Trust me, I haven't done enough of it, and it's really important that you make sure you keep yourself in the loop with that stuff. And just make sure that you're doing what you want and not what someone else wants. Like, I've spent a lot of time going after other people's goals, and when you achieve them, you realise they're not the goals you were actually intending for. So detailed goals are really key. You know, if you want a yacht, you know, you literally close your eyes, imagine yourself walking around the yacht, imagine who you'd be with, where the yacht would be, what colour it is, what it would feel like, what the toilet's like, what the bed's like, everything. So you really need to go into detail, because then you'll realise, is that the goal you actually want? Or is that the goal that you've just seen on TV or you've had an influence for, you know? So detail your goals really, really well, to the point where it gets a bit weird, you know, like you've got pictures of it up on your wall, or there's a specific person you want to meet, you know, things like that. Those goals are really key, and make sure you detail them, but sometimes you can have a bit of a sort of blurry image of what your goals are.
Thank you very much. And yeah, I think we've got to close now.
Cheers,
Thank
guys.
you so much for all your questions and contributions. I hope you enjoyed that.
Would you like to be at our next event? Visit dreamnation.co.uk and join our free mailing list in the top right-hand corner. You will receive exclusive content and free updates on future projects, so that you'll never have to miss out again. Work hard and keep dreaming.